Hello, everyone. Welcome to the newest podcast about kayak bass fishing in the nation. If you're here to talk kayaks and kayak fishing, you're in the right spot. Your host, John Suits, brings you into the exciting world of Greenfish Nation and all it has to offer. We will have special guests from product manufacturers as well as the end users from the ground level angler up to the big boy pros. The show starts right now, so get your paddles ready and let's get started.
Hey guys, it's John here with Beyond the Paddle. I have special guest Jeff Sprague tonight after some technical difficulties. I think we finally got that worked out. But you know me and computers, if it can go wrong, I'll make it go wrong. So you guys, we're gonna add Jeff here to the stage. I wanna welcome you, Jeff. I appreciate you coming tonight. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I just haven't had the platform together to do it, but thank you for coming. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it, and happy to get on and chat a little bit about the latest craze of electronics.
Well, we appreciate it because I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions. I put up a question on my Facebook feed the other day under the group that you recently joined, the Greenfish Nation Kayak Series Tournaments and Trails. And if you could improve on one thing with your fishing, what would it be? And about 90% of them would be understanding my electronics. So immediately you come to mind, and I thought, that's a good question for Jeff to come on and talk with us about. So thank you again.
You're welcome. And I've been very fortunate over the years to grow up with electronics. I caught the very front end of the side scan Humminbird era onto Lowrance, Garmin, and everything else that's come out now. And so I've been a product of that throughout my career. And I'm not going to say that I'm the best at it because there's some guys out there who understand it way better than I do. But I'm very proficient, I feel like, and I'm lucky enough to be able to make a living looking at my electronics nowadays. So that it is definitely something that you need to know what you're looking at, how to look at it, when to slow down, when to speed up, and then, just basic 101 information, because just like computers, electronics are very confusing, or they're a little intimidating, if you will. And that's a big problem when you get out on the water, because we go from simple bass fishing to now we're looking at computer screens.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are so limited, especially us, every weekend guys, or, fish when we can kind of guys, the ones that are not doing it for a living. We would rather spend time throwing than scrolling through that screen, and that's one of those things where you have to just set out and say, hey, look, this is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to learn to identify a fish, and I'm going to try to catch that fish using my electronics. I think that's the hardest thing to do.
It is, because it's intimidating, and you can trial and error it a lot, meaning you can see a lot of fish on your electronics and maybe not make them eat, and you're not sure what you're throwing at. There's, I get on the water with a lot of people, and, boat officials, cameramen, just sweepstakes winners and things like that. And truthfully, the number one question is, how do I know what kind of fish I'm looking at? That's probably the biggest question. And that all goes back to fish behavior more than it does actually being able to identify a fish by looking at an air bladder or the way it's set up. And so you just got to remember, when you're out looking at your electronics and you start off basic 101, times of the year will help you understand the way fish set up. So let's just say for now, a guy wants to go out on his kayak and he wants to understand what he's looking at. Well, just know that right now a guy can go out and he can go to a smaller body of water. He doesn't have to go to a Lake Fork or a Lake Tawakoni or a Lake Texoma, a big lake. He can go to a smaller lake, go down by the dam, out in that deep water where all those crappie are set up, and look at his electronics and know that you're looking at balls of bait and that you're looking at big schools of crappie that have migrated down there to feed for the winter. And it comes back around, and you start getting, that springtime, and those fish start to move in on those points, and they stage on stumps and things like that. You can start using your electronics to look at that shallower stuff and figure out that those are bass that are starting to stage, and so on and so forth. So that's a really good starting point on how to just start identifying what fish are and how they're up. You'll know, crappie stack up, bass don't do that. White bass will travel in large groups. Stripers are the same way. Bass, not so much. If you find a 30 fish school of bass, 40 fish school of bass nowadays, that's a tremendous school of fish. And that'll be a post-spawn deal most of the time.
Yeah. But one of the questions that one of my guys asked was how to identify fish. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my phone hooked up to the charger here. How to identify fish that are close to the bottom.
And those are the hardest fish to identify. I'll be very honest with you. The best thing that you can do when you see a fish that's close to the bottom, because what'll happen is you'll be amazed. A lot of times, if you can see one fish close to the bottom, there's a whole school of fish there. They're just laying on the bottom and you can't pick them up with your electronics. So that's where I highly suggest a guy keep like a spoon, a small spoon, like 3/4 ounce, and you can flip it over there to those fish, see how they react to it. You can, tie on a football jig, something that you can flip to them, and you can see exactly the way they react. And if it's a bass, 90% of the time that fish is going to be curious. If he doesn't eat it, he's going to follow it and he's going to look at it, and he'll even nose down on it and just kind of identify himself for you. And a lot of times, if you get one to do that and there's other fish in the area, then they'll actually come up off the bottom, come to life, and there'll be 25 fish there, and they'll all start fighting over your bait, and you'll actually get them to eat because they start competing for food.
Right. So that's where you hear the people using the term getting the fish fired up.
Correct. And so a lot of times when that happens, like I said, those fish are not when you find them with your electronics, they're not actively feeding. Sometimes they're just being lazy like us, sitting on the couch or laying on a hard clay bottom or on the side of a roll or something like that. And they're waiting for the bait to get up there and get where they can ambush it. So that's more along the lines of what I'm talking about when when you see a fish or a school of fish on the bottom and you're not sure what they are.
See. So as far as electronics go, I know, there's multiple different brands out there. As far as the color of the screen goes to you, what do you like? I like kind of that yellowish brown color. I'm not sure, every one of them has a different name. So
Yeah.
that's
And,
what I can see the best.
and that's where I'll just tell a guy up front, personal preference. There's no right or wrong answer there when it comes to your palette choice. I prefer the light blue hue, because I like the way it casts a black shadow and the way I can see it. So that's my personal preference. But for everyone sees differently. Everybody's color in their eye is a little different. So your eye may make amber pop more. Somebody may like black and white. Somebody might like the dark blues. I mean, there's so many different palettes out there now that, what I suggest you do, to be very honest with you guys, is go by and get next to a pylon or something, or find some fish, and when you're there and you actually found fish, whether you're catching them or not, you just want to see them, change pallets while you're doing it. Even in your kayak, when you're going down through there, just change your palette periodically and see which one that you truly like more. You'll be surprised at some point one may pop in. You'll be like, man, I could really see those fish well there. And that's whenever you'll make a decision, like, that's where I'm going to leave it from now on.
Yeah. Now, as far as like setting up your settings when you go to a new lake, I know every lake has different water and different portions of the lake. Not just every lake has different water, but every lake can have different water types or colors or clarities within that lake. What's a good starting point with that?
It all depends on your depth. I know kayaks are, a lot of times you're not wanting to be out there on those main lake points, if you will, and out in that deeper water. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I see guys out there doing it. But if you're out deeper, then I will run mine out a little further. I'll run it out to 100 feet on each side. And that's on side skin. That way I see further. But the shallower I get, the further in I bring it. So I may run it 50 feet on each side when I get into shallow water, because your scope is so much smaller, if that makes sense. It starts out small by the boat, and by the time it gets to there, it's widening out. and you're not picking up everything at 100 feet. You think you are, but you're really not. And then it actually winds up being super small. So you may wind up seeing a car out there at 100 feet, but it's tiny because it's so shallow. When you're deeper, you get a little bit more of an angle on that beam, and it actually shoots down and catches it like at a 45-degree angle and allows it to throw a better shadow and produce a bigger picture, a better quality picture, so you know what you're looking at. So whether if you're out on open water like at Lake Fork where there's hardly any grass anymore, you can always reach that out there to 100 feet. You can go beyond that if a guy feels like he can read it. But when you go back to shallow water, I highly suggest a guy bring your beam back into 50, 65 feet. That way you get a really crisp picture. You can see fish, you can see structure, logs, laydowns, dips, divots, high spots, everything that those fish are going to relate to. Just remember, it's just like when you're fishing with forward-facing sonars. The closer you're in with that sonar, the more detail you're going to get. If you go put it out to 110, 120 feet on a forward-facing or a side scan, you're losing detail because that's on the very edges of its realm, of its scope. So you just got to be careful with that.
Okay. So that brings up a good question about forward-facing sonar. Probably I would say, and I'm just throwing numbers here, first of all, probably 30% of people that fish out of a kayak don't even use electronics. But out of those 70%, probably 10% of them have uh, forward-facing sonar. But what do you see in the upcoming future as far as forward-facing sonar goes? I know I've been seeing some of these guys putting the perspective mounts on the back of their boat. What's up going on with that?
Guys are trying to find every single advantage that they can find and to being able to see what's going on down there. And there's several ways to look at that. There's ways, the way of looking at it as you get to see everything that's going on, see what you missed. Maybe you can turn around and catch them. You can spin your boat. There's so many different things to look at. Then you can also look at it as, look, I don't go to the lake all day to side scan and to just look at electronics. I want to fish. That's what we all go to the lake for. Okay.
Right.
So personally, I love sonars. I love forward facing sonar. I love side scan, down scan, 2D. I'm a fan of electronics, period, because it truly helps level the playing field with what we're doing. I personally have to have it because of who I'm fishing against. And these guys are pushing the envelope. And like you said, they're getting transducers on the back. They're getting transducers 2 or 3. Hell, they'll have 4 or 5 graphs. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. It even blows my mind these guys show up with. And I'm going to tell you like this, for everybody for the guys that you're going to show that's watching or that are going to watch this, do not be intimidated by those guys. And I'm going to tell you why. Because that guy is going to spend a lot of time looking at his graphs and making fewer casts.
Exactly.
You don't see every fish on a sonar. You don't see every fish on a forward-facing sonar. You don't see it on side ski. There's no way. They don't pick up. You have to have a fish at the right angle to see his air bladder perfectly. And now you'll get a glimpse or whatever, and you just miss them. So what I would tell guys is electronics are an absolute beautiful thing to have, and they're really help you understand where the fish are and what they're setting up on, whether it's grass and things like that. However, we were fishing long before sonars or forward facing sonars, and we'll be fishing long after if they go away. So don't spend your time thinking that you can't catch fish. You got to remember, I grew up when I was a kid with no sonars, nothing whatsoever, and we just fished what was in front of us.
Right.
That a guy can still be very productive and take off all the units off his boat and go out, and it goes back to your skill level. It goes back to reading the water. It goes back to understanding water temperature, understanding bait, understanding the sunshine, the wind, fishing the conditions. And if a guy will truly go out and just fish those types of things, he can be a successful angler and compete hands down. Now, I will exclude cold water a lot of times because obviously cold water, these fish suspend trees and so on and so forth. So forward-facing sonars and things, they make it nice to be able to pinpoint those fish.
Yeah, I know a lot of times when I go out, especially on Tawakoni this time of year, I've always heard people say you can't ever catch them anywhere but dirt shallow on Tawakoni. But it's been about 2 years ago. Me and my wife went out to off of White Deer Landing, and there's a point, or actually it's a hump out there, and we kept seeing some fish suspended out there on the graph, and we got some spoons. I figured it was probably striper, but sure enough, it's a big school of black bass out there, and that was very unusual. Everybody I've told that's like, oh, I'm not sure about that, but I know you've lived on the lake and you've probably done the same thing. So,
Well,
um,
very fortunate. And, I've been around the lake my entire life. It's where I cut my teeth. I'm not from Lake Fork. I'm from Lake Tawakoni, and I'm proud to say that. It's a great fishing lake. It's better than Fork will ever be, in my opinion. You might not go out there and catch 8s and 9s, but you can go out there and catch the daylights out of 3s, 4s, and 5s.
oh
And that's
yeah,
fun to me. My brother has the lake record there at Lake Tawakoni, 14 even, and I was lucky enough to help him weigh that fish, certify it, and that was a pretty cool moment to be able to see that. And I know for a fact that he's had one as big or bigger hooked and didn't get it in the boat, so it just wasn't meant to be. And so there's tremendous fish in the lake. It's just a matter of, and they're changing. That lake is changing. It used to fish really shallow, and the rumors were all true, but now there's a true Florida strain in that lake as well, and they're starting to move offshore. So it's going to open the doors up for guys to catch them different ways.
yeah. So back to the electronics. I've had another question about a guy asked me, what is the advantage of running 16 volts to your electronics versus 12?
So we know that when you run cleaner voltage, when in higher voltage, now you can't exceed 18 volts, I believe is what it is. You can't exceed that to your units. If you burn them up, then they will not warranty them. But if you run higher voltage, 15 to 18 volts, you get a crisper, cleaner, more. It just helps the system run cleaner. I don't think that when they engineered this, that the engineers really knew that, because they were probably running it on a 12 to 14 volt system, because that's what your average battery is.
Yeah,
But guys have figured out over the last few years, by hooking up lithium batteries and hooking up Milwaukee 20 volts or Milwaukee 18s or whatever, that for some reason that these units are running cleaner, and they're sharper, and they're also just, it makes the machine operate at a almost a processor at a higher rate to capture everything. And no freeze ups, there's no lightning bolts, there's no ghosts in there. It's the units just operate better at a little bit more voltage than what they're supplying them to at your normal manufacturer. So just remember, it does work better. However,
yeah,
be careful and don't go over your voltage, because if you burn up your forward facing sonar and you send it in for warranty and they test it, they'll not warranty it.
I see. Okay.
But
All
it is,
right. Well,
yeah, absolutely. And I suggest that. That's why I run a power harness. And you can make a power harness, guys. I'm just telling you straight up. You can run down to Lowe's or to Home Depot, anywhere, and you can buy the exact same wiring just for household wiring. And you can put that in your boat and run it straight from your battery, straight to your forward facing sonar boxes and in your kayaks. And it will act as good or better than what you buy for $250 or $300 from any of these companies that are doing the same thing. So save yourself some money and do it yourself if you want to.
yeah, that's what I did on my stuff. I had a question here. It says, what is the best system to start with for entry level for like side scan? What would you recommend somebody for that?
I'll just tell you guys, everybody makes a great side scan now. It used to be Humminbird made the best side scan. And then they kind of tapered off, and Garmin was making a good one, and Lowrance is making a good one. Now a lot of them are very similar and almost equal. I'm a Lowrance guy right now. I've been a Lowrance guy for many years. Their graphs are easy to use. They're very user friendly. There's not a lot of ways to get lost in them, and there's not a lot of ways to mess them up. they are so that's me. So I'll just go on a little tangent about Lowrance, meaning an HDS 9 is a great way to get started. It's a very entry level unit. You get to see everything on it that it offers you. It's the same transducer, same forward facing sonar that would go on to an HDS 16. You can put on a 9, and whenever you can upgrade that unit to a 12 or whatever you can afford. But just remember that that's an entry level, and the bigger the screen you have on your boat, the more detail you pick up. So you might miss something on a 9 or even a 10 or whatever's out there. When you see it on a 12, it's a little bit bigger, and so you're something that you may have just drifted over, whether it be a stump or somebody's brush pile. You might not have realized, hey, it looks small, but that brush pile is actually as big as a small car. I mean,
Right.
that big thing for me when I first got going on side scan was I would be like, man, it's just not very big. And then I would see it out of the water when Lake Tawakoni would go down 6 or 8 feet. And I'm like, holy cow, that's as big as a Volkswagen Beetle, and I thought that was the size of my coffee table. So
Right.
you have to fish it a lot of times. You need to stop, make some casts at it, feel it, see what it is, because don't let your misconception make you miss out on fish.
Yeah. So you said that was the Lowrance HDS 9?
Yes, sir. The Lowrance HDS 9 is a great entry level. You can get that relatively cheap. A setup now, I mean, you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean,
Oh,
tens
yeah.
of dollars on a setup if you want. And in, as you advance along, it's great to have. It's like having an entry level rod and reel. You can catch the same fish on an entry level rod and reel that you can catch on the highest end G Loomis Shimano that's out there.
Yeah.
It's just all personal preference at that point.
Yeah. Okay. You guys got anything else about the electronics? I know, transducer placement and wiring size, and there's so many little things that make a big difference. Just like you said about the running the 18 volts versus the 12, it doesn't. I think my understanding is all electricity has. So if you got 12 volts running 10 feet, you may not have quite 12 volts when you get there. So if you
Exactly.
got 18 volts, you may have 17 when you get there, or 15, depending on the distance traveled. So I can understand that.
There's the one thing that I will tell you guys, because you guys are in, kayaking is a huge thing. Guys, pay very close attention to your transducers when you're loading and unloading and storing your kayaks or your equipment. If you bump those transducers or you hit them very hard, you will crush or you will dislodge those crystals that are in those transducers for side scan and forward facing sonar, and you will never know. But all of a sudden, you're not getting the picture that you used to. You're not picking up little things because you damaged your transducer, and that's a $300 mistake every time you do it or more.
Yeah.
So when you're loading and unloading, I highly suggest protect it with either a towel, microfiber, something to where it doesn't get bumped. And even when you're in the water fishing and you slide over a stump or anything like that, and then all of a sudden it hits, you'll crush those crystals and those transducers. I'll tell you, I go through a few transducers a year in my bass boat just because I'm getting in and out. Lake Fork is notorious for it and hitting stumps, and you'll slide over it and then literally just bump that transducer on the top of a stump, and you'll see like a little small scuff mark. And then all of a sudden you'll notice you can't hardly find any fish. Something's going on. And
Yeah.
the transducer's reading, but it's not showing you everything. So word of wisdom, be very careful with your transducers and save yourself some money there.
So on as far as all the different views, 2D, down scan, side scan, what I know you've got multiple graphs on your boat, but what do you lean on first?
My graphs stay on down scan, side scan. Okay. The only time you'll catch me running a 2D 90% of the time is when I'm on pad and I'm running into something. I'll switch my whole screen over to 2D because I'll do the shoot through my hole. and that will allow me to check the water depth as I'm going in. And that way I don't run up on something that's out in the middle or things like that. Or if I run into a long pocket that may be a little shallow, sometimes your contour is not accurate. That allows me to see how deep I'm running.
Okay. All
but
right.
Side scan, down scan is your best friend. You can see everything on down scan, side scan that you can see on 2D, and you can see it better, in my opinion, meaning you see the Rice Krispies down there, the little blips, you know those are fish. You don't have to look for an arch and look for the density in the middle of the arch. And I know a lot of guys that still run 2D, but even when on the front end of my bass boat, I don't run 2D anymore. It's all down scan and forward facing for me. That's just because I can see exactly what's there, where they're going, and I know exactly. And honestly, it's easier for me to tell how big the fish is by looking at a down scan at an air bladder.
Honestly. So another question here that just popped up is says, do you think running strictly lithium on your electronics provides better results than AGM?
I'm not going to say it's better because power is power. The good thing about a lithium battery is it will provide the same amount of power until it's done, and then it turns itself off. An AGM battery will, over time, it will, voltage loss. However, if it gets low on voltage, you'll know, and it doesn't, and you still have time on the water. When you're on the water with a lithium and it says it's done, it's had its day, it's going to cut off and you're done. No more graphs. So I run AGMs. I don't run lithiums anymore. I've had too many fail me in my career. So I could run them if I wanted to. I choose not to. I choose to stay with an AGM. But you guys are also worried about weight, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with a lithium battery. They've got great lithium batteries on the market. That's just my personal preference, and by golly, they're expensive.
Oh yeah, I put 3 on my bass boat last year, and I bought some of the cheaper ones, and it was still like $2,100.
Yeah.
And then I bought a 100 amp hour 12 volt. Um, it's a mini. It's like half the size of a regular 12 volt, and I put it in a basically a little waterproof storage locker, like you'd carry a gun in or whatever. I bought it like at uh one of the stores, the tool stores. It's like
Yeah.
one of those Pelican cases. I couldn't think of the name. And anyway, I put it in there and wired it all up, and I got quick disconnects on it and all that, and I love it. But like you said, you're tooling along there with your trolling motor, and you're running along 3 or 4 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden it doesn't sputter, it just quits.
Yes. And I've had that happen to me. The last time I had lithium batteries, I was in a Forest Wood Cup, and my lithium batteries quit me at 12:45, and I didn't have to be checked in until 3:15. Cost me a lot of fishing time and very well cost me a lot of money. And at that point in my career, I literally, that day after I got off the water and weighed in, I had someone go down to Walmart and they bought me 4 EverStart batteries, and I took out those lithium batteries and I put $400 worth of EverStarts in my boat and never missed another lick. And I ain't looked back since, boys.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those are some good questions. And these guys are, I can tell that they're right on, spot on with what they're wanting to do with their electronics, and they're pretty savvy with it, and they're asking the right questions. So sounds like they've done their homework and they really do know, what needs to be done. And a lot of that stuff is, some of these companies are just trying to sell you things, that you might not need. But at the end of the day, we're all out there to fish. And that's what you're there to do. The electronics help you do that, and they help you locate. And, but there's a couple things that are key: water temperature, and then your depth. I mean, without that, a lot of times you don't, you might as well just leave her on the trailer.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember Miss Betty that used to own Sabine Tackle.
I do.
Okay, so Miss Betty always told me something that I've never forgotten, and it was specifically about fishing lures, but it can go to fishing in general. She said fishing lure manufacturers, they all make 2 kinds of lures. They make lures that catch fish, and they make lures that catch fishermen. So you got to be real careful on which one of those you buy. So
And guys, I'm gonna be, and I'm gonna tell you right now, John. Listen to me. They're selling more baits to fishermen right now than they are to fish, brother.
absolutely, I
Like,
understand it.
on the market right now is these swim baits, these giant swim baits that are going for crazy numbers, and these ducks and this hey, look, I'm going to tell you right now, don't buy into it, guys. They eat rubber worms. Bass eat rubber worms. They're not that smart. Okay. They need to have realistic eyeballs. They don't have to have 12 count fin thread on their tail. So you can listen, I can throw a big swim bait with the best of them, and I can watch 25 big bass a day follow it and never catch a single one. You can come back and I can come back and tell you a whole bunch of stories about all the fish I saw. And guess what? I didn't get a paycheck, but I can also tell you, I can take a daggum Senko out there and I can catch as many or more than you can. And and then at the end of the day, I'll take my check and go to the Waffle House, and you can take your swim bait and go home.
There you go. I hear you.
Yeah. Don't buy into all that stuff. Save your money and go with what works.
So I got another question. It says, do you see Lowrance making a product to match or mimic Humminbird 360 in the near future?
So they have one out actually already that they have. It's a nose cone that goes on your trolling motor, and it actually has a 360 screen on your graph that's round, and it's a download. It's a free download from Lowrance. The name of it escapes me, and the reason it does is because I don't use it. It's been put on my boat. I have it. I just don't use it that much. And if I do use it, a lot of times it's either because I'm in rock or grass. And when I use it, I'm looking for holes in grass, or I'm looking for rock veins when I'm up smallmouth fishing. Other than that, I don't use it that much. But, I have friends, Brian Thrift, a good friend of mine, and he will not go fishing without a 360, period. But he also has his forward facing sonar, and I understand why. He can spot lock on a spot, and with his 360, he can maintain and know exactly where everything around him is to throw. He knows where the ledge is. He knows where the rock vein runs out. He knows where the grass line is. He knows where that laydown is. And if the fish get crazy, he can still actually see some fish on it too. Me, I'm a different type of fisherman. I cover a tremendous amount of water throughout the day. I don't look for a tree or a rock vein. If I find it, then I'll mark it and I'll fish it. But like, he's that kind of guy. He's going to idle all day. He's going to mark that rock vein, or he's going to mark that tree with fishing, and he's going to come back and he's going to set on it, and he's going to make repetitive casts until he figures them out, or until it makes them bite, or until they leave. So there's just different types of anglers out there. I am a power fisherman to the extreme. I'll burn those trolling motor batteries up. It's just different types of guys. But yes, Lowrance has it out. It's really not that expensive. I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's my fault, and I apologize for not. But they do have something out there that's relatively similar. Do a little recon on that and see if you can't check it out. But they do have it. Free download. Your graph is savvy with it already, and it's basically a plug and play. You take a hex screw, remove the nose cone off your trolling motor, put the new nose cone on, and it's got the transducer mounted on it. And then you literally get a download from Lowrance, put it in your graph, download it, and then touch your screen, and it has that very similar icon to your 360.
I see. Okay, well that's interesting to know. I'll have to check that out. What's the next evolution of electronics, and do you have any insight on how AI will be integrated into it? This is a hot topic right now. I've heard a lot of scuttlebutt about AI and fishing, and how's it going to affect our industry?
I'll be honest with you. I don't do a lot of YouTube, or I don't do a lot of video watching. I spend a tremendous amount of time on the water, guys. John will tell you, he sees me on the water here and there, in places and days, putting in at little bitty ramps, fishing, because I put myself in scenarios that I'm going to face when I'm out in a tournament situation. So that's why I spend so much time on the water. The AI and all these things that are coming down, I truly feel like they're trying to catch fishermen, and they're trying to figure out another way to sell you something for another couple $1,000, versus just a guy who wants to go out and enjoy fishing. No matter what, fish are going to come to the bank in the spring. They're going to go offshore in the summer, and they're going to suspend in the winter. When a guy can learn all these tactics and basic 101 fishing tactics, the rest is all out the window because you already know. Like you just have to go find them and you got to catch them. So to me, I'm gonna stay away from that a little bit, and I'm not going to get too caught up in it just because we have enough on our plate right now. Bass are hard enough to catch sometimes without all that nonsense, you know.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Go with what works. Go with what your gut tells you, and and fish what's in front of you. And I feel like that the rest of this stuff will all kind of, the dust will settle on it eventually. It's going to change the sport of fishing without a doubt. It already has, but nonetheless, it's just, we're gonna have to see what the future brings.
Yeah. So the question popped up again about finding fish close to the bottom. We already discussed that, but basically what Jeff said is, if you find one fish close to the bottom, there's usually going to be a bunch. Have a spoon or a jig or something, throw it in there and get bit, and get them fired up, and you'll find that there's multiple fish along the bottom there usually. So,
And you'll pull them off the bottom. They'll either come up and follow that jig up, and you can see what they are, or if they flare away from it, or they don't want to interact with it. A lot of times, it can be a catfish, drum, buffalo, and just your time on the water will tell you what those fish are, because a lot of times those fish, they act a little differently. They don't set up like a bass. They're not as aggressive. If you get out there, especially in a kayak, and you're around bass and they're on the bottom, they don't know you're there a lot of times because you guys don't have the trolling motor noise. You don't have, or the big trolling motor noise. You don't have the thumping and all the stuff that's going on in a boat, and you can surprise those fish and you can catch them.
yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've caught a fish right at the boat. I mean, I could have reached out and grabbed it, and it's just all got to do with stealthiness.
Stealthiness is a huge deal. Slamming doors, kicking things around, dropping rods, kids playing
Yep.
I have guys that play radios. It blows my mind. I want to hear a bass blow up behind me or in the weeds, or I want to hear them
Exactly.
shad popping, brim clicking, whatever you want to say, bullfrogs croaking. I don't want to hear Taylor Swift. I mean, it's just not my deal, guys.
Right. You want to pay attention to what's going on around you, both visually and audible. So,
Absolutely. 110%. Yes, sir.
just a couple more questions, and I won't keep you. I know we've been on here for a while, but so it says, as a kayak angler, I'm limited in how much water I can cover. How would you plan or practice around this limitation? We don't have the option, most of us, of jumping up on pad and running from the dam at Tawakoni all the way up to the north end or up West Rocky Ford or something. We have to load up and drive, and that takes more time than running there, but so we have to plan and counter plan, and have a ternary plan as well. So
Yeah, and you guys are susceptible to wind and the weather conditions, and things change, storms come in. I totally get it, and I understand. Time of the year is going to be the first thing that I'm going to look at. Okay, meaning if you're going in an early spring event and you think the water temperature is going to be warm enough where there's going to be some fish start to move in, then I'm going to start picking shallow, flat areas and a place that has several different pockets for me to check to get into with a kayak. That's going to be my first thing. And then second, I'm going to look at the weather, see which way the wind's going to blow. If it's going to blow to the north, are we expecting a cold front, or is it going to switch and blow out of the south and warm up? That way you can plan to stay on that side of the lake. If it's going to blow out of the west, then you need to be on the east side of the lake, if to be protected in the spring. Summertime, you're going to try to pick an area of the lake that it's going to be that you have access to some points. You're going to have access to some secondary points, and you have access to some main lake water, because that's where those fish will be going to. Picking your area of the lake obviously is a huge deal. Map study, looking at that stuff on aerial maps if you can, Google Earth, whatever the case may be, water level, and then at the end of the day, if you're out there and you're fishing just like us, no matter if you're in a kayak or not, and it's slick, and all of a sudden the wind starts blowing, and you've been dragging a worm or soaking a Cinco or throwing a topwater, and the wind, you better pick up a square bill, or you better pick up a rattle trap, or you better pick up a buzz bait, and you start go to work and fish the conditions, because it literally takes 3 minutes for the wind to blow and those fish to automatically turn on like a light switch. I've seen it so many times in my career to where the fishing conditions change, it's dead, and all of a sudden things start happening, and it happens so fast. It doesn't take long. You don't need the wind to blow into a bank for an hour before you head over there. If the wind starts blowing into a bank, ease over there and start getting after it. You'll be amazed. There will be fish that will start feeding on it.
Yeah, they'll fire up just like they will, I guess, when you hit that jig or that spoon off the bottom. They're just waiting on the chance to get turned on. So
Yep, and little things like that go such a long way, guys. But
yeah,
just do a little map study, weather study, and then, time of the year study, meaning, if it's going to be a spring event and it's going to be a spawn event, then try to put yourself in those situations or in those areas where you've got a lot of target rich environment to fish and you don't have to move. And if that means you go way up into an arm, then that's where you go and you're committed. If you stay down the lake where you can bounce around little pockets, then that's your strategy. You just, time on the water will tell you what you need to do and where you need to be honest with you.
yeah. Okay. Well, Jeff, I really do appreciate you coming in here and speaking with us. And I know your free time is very limited, having a farm and, and getting ready to fish for a living and just coming out of hunting season. I really want to thank you for being here with us, and we look forward to having you again. And I look forward to hooking up with you and going and doing some fishing over here on the home pond when we can both make that happen, which is not very often, it seems like. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and I will be in touch with you, and we'll get something else going sometime when you have time. But you got one.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, if you got one last tidbit for these guys, I'll let you get that out, and then we're going to get off here.
Yeah, I mean, guys, spend time on the water. I get so many people that say, I watched this on YouTube. I watched this on this video. This guy told me that. So many times that these are situational. These are small situations, and it's a situational condition. And you're thinking when you go out there, hey, I'm going to throw this bait and I'm going to make it work. Well, what you don't realize is it was a condition. It's a water temperature thing. It's a water clarity thing. It's just a time of the year thing. And it's like a big swim bait. Everybody wants to throw a big swim bait. Truthfully, the best time to throw a big swim bait is right there at the spawn. They're up there, they're territorial, or right post spawn when they're feeding on big gizzard shad. It's a small window, but I see guys throwing it year round. And I mean, I'm sure they have stories about fish they've seen, just don't catch a lot. Spend time on the water, and learn more. Put yourself in those situations and you'll become a better angler. Whether you're fishing off the bank from a kayak in a bass boat, it doesn't matter. Just get out there and get after it. And remember, we're all out there to have fun. We're all out there to be friends. Be kind to one another. And, at the end of the day, let's share a fish story and enjoy it.
Amen, brother. Well, I appreciate you joining us. I'm going to let you go, and we'll holler at you later, okay?
Thanks, guys. If y'all need anything, feel free to hit me on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions for anyone. Y'all take care.
All right, guys. That was Jeff Sprague answering some of your questions about electronics. I really do appreciate you tuning into the podcast tonight, even though we had a few technical difficulties on the front end. Jeff is a genuine good guy, and like he said, if you need something, I've never hollered at him that I haven't got an answer. Sometimes it might take a few days because of his travel schedule and whatnot. But Jeff is a down to earth, real guy, and I appreciate him for that. He doesn't have a problem answering your questions. He's not one of those guys that you approach anywhere and he acts like he's better than you. So, guys, if y'all have any more questions for him, let's put together a feed and we'll get back with him again. I think he's shared a lot with us tonight that'll help us out. But don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, Bass Fishing with Greenfish Nation, y'all slide over there to that YouTube channel. Go down there to that corner and click that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow. It helps us to be able to put good content out and have good guests for you guys. Until next time, I'm John with Greenfish Nation, and I want to wish you guys
Thank you again for joining our podcast. We appreciate your continued support. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Bass Fishing with Greenfish Nation. Check us out on Facebook at the group Greenfish Nation Kayak Tournament Series trails, and challenges. We can also be found on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok under the handle Greenfish Nation. Thanks again, and until next time, I'm John, and I want to wish you tight lines, guys.